PlayStation 4 has been announced, and we did get a sense of what's under the hood of this new console, and it's very clear it is quite distinct from what the PlayStation 3 was. The PlayStation 3's driving force was this cell processor, this near magical deus ex machina that could come in and solve all development problems in the world, except that it was so challenging to program for, it really kind of neutered a lot of developers, and it was only after years in that people could figure out how to fully exploit it. They clearly, and as they said, have built this system with developers in mind, and it sounds like it's an architecture that's a little bit more akin to what you expect from other consoles, such as the Xbox 360. We have a separate GPU, and we have a separate CPU. They said it's an x86 for the CPU, and they were a little bit on the vague side as to what the graphics processor was, pretty much calling it a supercharged computer. It's interesting also, with so many rumors going around that AMD was going to be responsible for the chipset, that no manufacturer was actually identified. In addition, and probably the thing that I wanted to hear the most, is that it has 8 gigs of RAM. This is good RAM at DDR5. This might finally resolve a problem that has not just plagued the PlayStation consoles in years past, but all consoles which have these very, very strong processors, and then it creates this bottleneck because they don't have enough RAM in it. This could really alleviate long load times, be able to store more stuff to memory. It really should be the most clear enhancement of the gaming experience. Having said that, I don't expect the new Microsoft console to have any less or that much different RAM there. Also, really of no surprise, it's going to have a hard drive. Now, what's interesting is it's going to also have a very sophisticated OS, which sounds like that's something that might want to be living on a solid state drive, though they made no mention of that whatsoever. That might be something they will detail more in the future, although I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear much more talk about specs. Another thing that was quite notable was the announcement of the DualShock 4, as it still kind of looks like the DualShock. It looks a little bit more substantial, which I'm happy with, but it has a touchpad on the front, and it also works in conjunction with a sensor bar, implying that there is some degree of motion control. In fact, there's actually a light that you can see on one end of it that is quite reminiscent of the illumination that you get from the Move controller. Nothing was demonstrated about how it would actually be utilized, but they definitely are covering their bases for a lot of the innovations we've seen with, say, the DS with the touchpad, or what we're already seeing on the iPad, and motion control, which is, well, it's definitely here to stay. One other aspect I found fascinating is there's a new button on the controller. It's a share button, so you can record your gameplay and very quickly upload it and share it with your friends. For what myself and my colleagues do for a living, obviously capturing a lot of game video, it's interesting seeing those tools put in the hands of everybody who's playing the game, and how that's going to be changing the landscape of sort of covering games, of streaming games, and seeing top-level players sort of put their stuff out there. There is a lot of potential. Do I feel threatened? Not yet, but let's check in on that later. One of the other things about the tech that I found very exciting is it was introduced by a man named Mark Cerny, who I guess is now considered the chief architect of the PlayStation 4. In previous years, that architect was the one and only Ken Kutaragi. I've always had a great admiration for Mark Cerny, who has always struck me as one of the most brilliant minds, and actually one of the nicest guys who work in the game industry. And I think that with his sensibility towards ease of use, ease of development, that it really is encouraging that a lot of what they said about it being very developer friendly really could turn out to be true. The other part of the tech of the PS4 that we were presented with today came from a man named Dave Perry, who once used to make games like Earthworm Jim at a studio called Shiny, but who has since shifted into making a game streaming service called Gaikai that was recently purchased by Sony. And this seems to be expanding to something far more ambitious than I had originally anticipated. It is a cloud gaming service, and the big, I think, immediate benefit is that this will now allow for the availability of all PlayStation titles throughout history to be played on the PS4, just not processed on the PS4 because they're going to be streaming from the cloud. This takes care of the backwards compatibility problem that was going to be essential since they moved from the cell processor of the PS3 to something far different here with the PS4. What was surprising about all of this is what they plan to do. That with the sense of the streaming, that you're going to be connected to other players at all times. It is, sort of social networking inside of the game. One of the concepts that they presented is that someone else could go into your game and help you out if you were stuck, or who knows. I mean, you could actually have something closer to what Dungeons and Dragons really should be, with some guy's a dungeon master who plays God and makes all the problems and all the fun for all of the other players. It is something that sounds great and filled with potential, but it's worth pointing out. They didn't demonstrate demonstrate this happening. They made it out that it was possible. They really kind of set a benchmark of where they can go with it, and they were very forthright in saying that all of these aspects of the PlayStation Cloud will be rolled out over time and probably will not be available in one huge package at the launch of the system. One thing that wasn't terribly surprising, but it was very interesting to hear, is that the PS Vita is still something very valuable to Sony, and it sounds like because of this cloud service, it can also be streaming your games, including the PS4 games, and I gotta say, that might revitalize what has become almost a joke for a lot of people with Sony's very impressive, but very, very undersold handheld. So, you get a sense of the tech. I think it's more a sense of confidence that they really have understood the problems that existed with the PlayStation 3 and are willing to make some fairly significant changes to try to adapt to what the developers are asking for, and very importantly, what the third-party developers are asking for. And this could at least make it more competitive by having a large library of games, just as large, with the exception of Sony-owned exclusives, to what the other consoles have. Obviously, we have a lot more coverage. You can see other videos up here right now. We're going to be talking about the games we also saw here at the PlayStation 4 announcement. So go click on that and check it out.